Well, welcome, my friends, to another Common Communion. My name is Jonathan Brandenburg, and I get to be your host, and I get to be the pastor at Christ Lutheran Church and School in Ranchos Palos Verdes in beautiful California. And it is good to be with you guys today. It is really good. We're going to tackle another parable today, and as we continue on seeing what these parables uplift in how Jesus tells them and sort of the truths that are within them. And today's parable, I think, is can somewhat be a bit of a tough one, because it is the parable of the Rich Man and Lazarus. And in the parable of Rich Man and Lazarus, it basically goes like this. There's a rich man, and he is enjoying all the trappings and luxuries that a rich man would normally enjoy, feasts and food and parties and all that kind of stuff, right? But outside of the house, somewhere outside on the property, outside the property of the rich man, is a poor man, who happens to have a name of Lazarus. And Lazarus is the exact opposite of the rich man. He is not having a good time. He is poor. He has sores all over his body, to the point that even the dogs feel sorry for him and lick the sores of his body. Well, eventually, Lazarus passes on, but so does the rich man. And this is where the parable kind of has a weird turn, because all of a sudden now we're in this sort of afterlife setting, and in this afterlife setting, we get Lazarus, who is in presumably heaven, but he's with Father Abraham. He's with Abraham in heaven, or in the heavenly realms. And the rich man, unfortunately, is in another place, a place called, that the Gospel of Luke calls Hades. By the way, this is all from Luke chapter 16, in Hades. And there in Hades, he is in torment. He is in sort of some sort of fiery torment. But anyway, he calls up to, he sees Lazarus with Abraham, and he calls up to Abraham, and he says, will you let Lazarus just dip his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I'm in torment here? And Abraham says, no, we can't do that. There's a chasm between you and between me, and you can't cross over to us, and we can't cross over to you. And so the rich man, still in Hades, calls out, well, at least send Lazarus to go and tell my brothers, so they can avoid, he has 5 brothers, I guess, is tell my 5 brothers what's happened, basically, or what is happening. And Abraham says to the rich man, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen. Let those 5 brothers listen to them. And the rich man disagrees. He says, no. I know he has Moses and the prophets, but if a man comes back from the dead, then they'll believe whatever they're supposed to believe. And Abraham says, no, if they don't believe Moses and the prophets, they're not going to believe, even if a man comes back from the dead. So this is, sorry about that. This is one of those parables that you can actually ponder basically for the rest of your life if you want to. But the thing that probably makes me the most upset about this parable is that when it gets talked about, it doesn't get talked about, well, it gets talked about in a way and in a focus and a point that actually doesn't make a lot of sense for the parable itself. And what I mean by this is simply this, that when people want to talk about this parable, or when people read this parable, the very first thing that so many people run to is this heaven, hell, and the chasm in between heaven and hell. But again, let's be specific to this parable. The place where Abraham resides, maybe the heavens, right? And Hades, which is a very weird word for for at least a Jew to use at the time, but they could have used it 100% as well. But it's this very Greco-Roman word, meaning sort of this underworld sort of life that's not necessarily a good place. But you have this huge chasm in between them as well. And every time we have this dialogue about this parable, it seems to be like, let's talk about the chasm, let's talk about heaven, let's talk about hell. And I'm like, I don't think so. I mean, you can talk about a chasm. I mean, you can talk about heaven or hell, 100%. But first of all, how many times have you ever wondered about the context of a parable before? I mean, like, for real, how many of you have ever asked, I wonder whatever happened to those 99 sheep? The one sheep wandered away, right? And we had a big party for them. I wonder what happened to the 99 sheep? And what about that shepherd? So weird. And how many of you have ever, like, wondered about that girl that keeps losing coins? Man, you know that girl that keeps losing coins? And then when she finds a coin, she, like, throws a huge party that's way worth more than the coin itself. How many of you have ever just wondered about that? Or the wedding feast. How many of y'all have wondered about that wedding feast? Man, that's a weird feast. Man, you just like, none of the guests show up, and all of a sudden you're just going out into the streets and pulling people off the streets for your party. That's a weird party. I don't even know if I want to go to that kind of party. How many of you have ever wondered about the context of a parable? That there's some deeper truth within the context, the setting itself? Basically, none of us. None of us think about the other 99 sheep, like if there was a real 99 sheep and what's up with them. Or none of us have really talked about a real woman who really loses coins and then throws huge extravagant parties once she finds them. And nobody has ever wondered about this wedding banquet that none of the guests show up and then just starts inviting random people off the streets. Because the context of parables is not where the truth lies, or I should say the setting of the parable isn't where the truth lies. It's good to know the setting, it's good to know the context, but that's not where the truth of the parable is at. Jesus isn't trying to point specifically to this particular guy or this particular woman or this particular space. The parable is getting at a deeper, more universal truth about us humans, about our world that we live in. It's not about a specific thing. And so even when it's thrown up into the afterlife sort of realm, in heavenly realms or the realm of Hades, that's not the point. The chasm, whether it exists or not, isn't the point. And yet so many times, it's what we want to talk about. But what Jesus wanted to talk about, what I'm pretty sure Jesus wanted to talk about that day, was this idea of money. This idea of what does money do to us, and what does money not do for us, and specifically what having the love of money will do or not do for us. I think that's the whole point. And actually, we're going even deeper into that. I think it's who money points us to and who money doesn't point us to. Now, what I mean by that is basically this, and let me tell you a little side parable or side story, if you will, about my grandma. It's her birthday in a day, so 95th birthday for my grandma, so I got to tell a story about my grandma. When I was young, she made me mow the lawn. It's a pretty good sized lawn there back in Kansas. The problem with mowing the lawn with grandma was two things. One, she would usually, not always, but usually give me a mower without a motor. Yep, a mower without a motor. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about here. It's basically a medieval looking blade that goes around as you push it. And it's pretty hard, honestly. And these are not small little lots, like a little patch of grass, little California patch of grass. This is Kansas lot sizes here. And I'll never forget one day when she had me mow the lawn with this push mower with no motor. It took me forever. And that was the first problem. The second problem was at the end of mowing her lawn, she looked over and says, "You missed a spot." Now in Kansas, unlike a lot of probably places, there's little green spaces in between lots sometimes. And it usually is about like a little path that leads to the back of houses or in between houses, little alleyway, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, and there's a little path, and then she said, you missed a spot. I'm like, that's not ours, that's the city's, or that's somebody else. She said, oh no, but you're gonna do it. And I was like, there's gravel underneath that grass. That grass was pretty tall as it is. That gravel is going to come up on this medieval blade and shoot back at me. Is that what you want, Grandma? She's like, you missed a spot. So I went and I got that spot as well. And yes, several pieces of gravel did shoot back at me right at my shins, and my shins have never been the same, I swear to you. And yet here the final problem existed is when I got done with that green belt, green path area, she said, you missed a spot as well. And there was a little edge of our neighbor's yard that I don't know if he just missed it or doesn't like to mess with it, or maybe likes to leave it a little wild, but a little edge of our neighbor's yard, but it didn't look that great. And she said, you got to get that spot as well. And she's like, that's so not mine. That is so not mine. That is the neighbor's for sure. Can't pass it off on the city. This is totally the neighbor's. And she said, no, but you got to do it. And I argued for longer than I'd like to admit, but eventually I went and did it. And when I got inside this house, when I got inside my grandma's house, after mowing this yard, not just her yard, not just the green belt the pathway, and not just a bit of my neighbor and a bit of her neighbor's yard, I was so mad. I was so mad, y'all. And I went in and I said, Grandma, why'd you make me do all that? And she handed me a lemonade. It was the best tasting lemonade I think of my entire life. Gulped it down. And while I was just finishing that lemonade, she said, John, it shows a lot about a person who's willing to take responsibility for something that doesn't belong to him, but that is in his world. Let me say that again. Grandma sayings are always worth a second saying. It shows a lot about a person who's willing to take responsibility for those things that they don't own, doesn't belong to them, but ultimately is still in their world. Guys, I think this is what Jesus is trying to say. He's not talking about a chasm. He's not talking about heaven. He's not talking about Hades or hell. That's good. Those are interesting topics, and we're all fascinated by some of those topics. He's talking about the role of people. And when people get money, when people get obsessed with money, they start missing things. They have a lot of things, right? But in having lots of things, they start missing things. They start not seeing quite right. And that the love of that money, or the worry about that money, or how you spend it, or how you save it, or how you do whatever with it, sort of starts consuming their entire world, little bit by little bit, until you just don't see anything but how to handle money, or deal with money, or deal things around dealing with money. And you see, I think this is what blinded the rich man. He was actually missing out on Lazarus. And Lazarus, while looking like he was in hell, and surely he was in a very bad space, actually the soul of the rich man was really experiencing the hellish stuff. The soul of the rich man was experiencing the hell of not being able to see other people. The hell of being constantly obsessed with this idea of money and how to spend it and how to deal with it and how to save it, all sorts of things like that. He was experiencing little bits and pieces of the hell that he ultimately was heading toward. And yet, Lazarus suffered. And he couldn't see the simplicity and the heartache of the hell that Lazarus was experiencing. But this is also why Jesus says in another place, blessed are the poor, or blessed are the poor in spirit. Because Jesus sees actually a blessing in poverty. He sees a blessing that those that struggle, those that really honestly struggle with a lot of different things, but specifically a poverty of material possessions or poverty of spirit, are opened up to seeing a bit more of the kingdom, are opened up to seeing actually how things really work, seeing other people, even seeing the simplest of things like dogs. You see, Lazarus, while experiencing a lot of hellish stuff, also experienced kingdom stuff that the rich man would never be able to experience. He was blind to experiencing. And this is why ultimately when he passes on in this parable, he gets to be with Abraham, the father of faith. Abraham, who didn't see what was before him, but he went after it. Abraham, who was promised a whole host of offspring and to be a great nation, a huge land, and to be a great nation, and never saw any of that except just a little bit of it. This is who Lazarus ends up next to. And Lazarus takes responsibility of that. Lazarus owns that. You don't hear Lazarus giving excuses. You don't hear Lazarus doing much of anything, actually, in this. But what do you hear the rich man saying, even from these torments of Hades? Hey, Abraham, tell that Lazarus guy. The rich man still can't see Lazarus. He's willing to talk to the chief, the father of faith, Abraham. But he's not even willing to call out directly to Lazarus. Still can't see him. And he also says it again. Abraham, order Lazarus to dip his finger. Abraham, order Lazarus to go back and see my brothers. Too bad. Too bad that the rich man just couldn't see him. That he was so in this mindset that he must be blessed. And he was so in this mindset that Lazarus must be cursed, because that in that day, in Jesus' day, that was the mindset. If you have material blessings, you must be blessed by God. And if you have something wrong with you or something's gone horribly wrong in your life, you must be cursed by God. This is how Job even gets described. Job's friends, if you've ever read the book of Job, they all think Job has done something horrible, something wrong, because something horrible has happened to Job. But no, nothing's happened. Job's done nothing horrible. And yet, this is befallen Job. Just like Lazarus. Lazarus hasn't done anything wrong. This is just befallen him. And yet, that's not what the rich man can see. Not only is he obsessed with dealing with his own wealth and his own power and his own affluence, but he's also obsessed with the idea that blessing must equal into material blessings. That if material blessings are there, I am blessed by God. But that's not how it works. And Lazarus must be cursed by God because he's gone through all this hardship. That's not how it works. And Jesus is directly challenging this. Jesus is directly challenging the religious leaders of the day, some of the Pharisees, the scribes, the elders. But Jesus is challenging everybody, all of us, even to this day, that if we see blessing on this level of success, then we're missing out. If we see this blessing on the level of material possessions, we're going to miss out. We're not going to see clearly. We're going to miss the who because we're so obsessed with the what. We're going to miss people because we're so obsessed with the possessions. We're going to miss time with others, service to neighbor, no matter where they come from and who they are, because we're so busy dealing with our own blessings, our own treasures. And ultimately, this just creates a bit of a hellish situation. This ultimately creates a space where our entire identity becomes our success. Whether that's success in material possessions or whether that's success in some sort of activity or how we look or how much power we hold in a certain space, it doesn't matter. Our identity is attached to success. Our identity is attached to ultimately what Jesus was called the love of money or the love of possessions. And yet, it tells a lot about a person when they're willing to take responsibility for things that don't belong to them, that are ultimately in their world. Thank you, Grandma Ashburn, for that wisdom. Because that's what this parable is teaching us. Are we willing to take responsibility for those around us, our neighbors, who are going through very difficult seasons? Are we willing to see them for who they are and what they're going through? Are we willing to see their needs? Are we willing to see their hurts? Are we willing to see them, not just who we think they are, not just our judgment, not just the peripheral thing as we quickly go past them or close our garage door or look the other way? Are we willing to stop, be interrupted by the kingdom, and see people. And not just the things we got to do or the things we have to take care of or the things that we have. My friends, I hope we can see. I hope that we can take a certain responsibility for loving our neighbors, even though they don't belong to us, but they're in our world. And it's what Jesus has invited us to do. That we don't go past people, especially people on the fringes or people on these edges of our property or of our life. The rich man probably did the bare minimum of what the law required him to do at the time, but it wasn't enough. The rich man probably did do some sort of charity, but it wasn't enough, because Jesus says it's all of what we have is his. All of what we own is his. We don't give out of this little structured sort of way of like, oh, I have this much percent or I have this much percent. Yeah, I mean, you can do it that way, but Jesus actually invites us to see a more kingdom perspective, to see a more holistic perspective, to say all of who we are, all of our treasures, no matter how you want to talk about them, are ultimately God's and is ultimately accessible for use for anybody who needs a neighbor, anybody who needs grace, encouragement, or love. That's what it means to see them. See, a rich man never saw him. He knew he was there. He knew that Lazarus was around. And he did some bare minimum stuff to help him. But he didn't see him. Not even after life did he see him. And yet we are invited to see everyone. We are invited that at any moment a neighbor could be in need. That at any moment that we could be called in any chunk of our treasure, our possessions, however you want to think about that, to give back, to share with another. And that's what it means. That's what it means to follow after Jesus. That's what grace means. That's what courage from Jesus means, is the courage and the grace to not only be seen, which is awesome, but then to see others, to take responsibility for that which doesn't belong to us, but is still very much in our world. May all of us, my friends, may all of us see. May all of us see our neighbors, see who they are before we judge them for what they are. May we see them for who they are at that moment, where they are, before we just write them off as not our responsibility. And may all of us who have been given the grace and the courage freely by Jesus share that grace and share that courage as we interact and love our neighbors. Amen. Well, my friends, thank you so much for joining us on another Common Communion. It's great to be with you. Have a great day, my friends, and we will see you next time on the Common Communion. But for now, stay safe out there, and remember, God loves you. All right, bye, my friends.